My dearest brothers and sisters, this is Tunia speaking. I love you so very much. This was channeled a few days after the assassination attempt on the person pretending to be Trump. For those who missed it, in the earlier message, Hakann, the gray hats have failed. Hakann shared that the real Trump is already dead. Still, to make things easier, I'll just talk about Trump for the rest of this message, rather than talking about the person pretending to be Trump. Of course, shooting someone just because you disagree with them is awful, and I can absolutely imagine that news of the assassination attempt may have shocked you, may have made you feel unsafe, and may have made you feel angry. You already know that the mainstream media and some people on the left have used dehumanizing language against Trump, and that this increases the likelihood that someone will try to kill him. So in that sense, I'm not going to tell you anything new today. And yet, today I want to stress just how absurd dehumanizing language is when you really stop and think about it. For example, mainstream media and some people on the left have called Trump an existential threat or a threat to democracy. Now, obviously this is excessively alarmist. Trump isn't an existential threat. He's not going to end democracy. But on an even deeper level, calling Trump a threat to democracy frames things as if he's not even a person. It frames things as if he's not even a human being. Instead, he's something like a disease. And what do you do with disease? You cure it, you get rid of it. Indeed, calling Trump a threat to democracy sounds completely different than calling Trump a human being who is currently a threat to democracy. With that second phrasing, suddenly it becomes clear that this is a human being we're talking about, who deserves human rights and who deserves to be treated with dignity. Frankly, if you want to have a productive and humane conversation with someone, I wouldn't even say that same person is a left-winger. Instead, I would say that they're a human being who is currently a left-winger. Similarly, a person isn't a communist. Instead, they're a human being who is currently a communist. A person isn't an illegal immigrant. Instead, they're a human being who is currently an illegal immigrant. I assume that many people aren't going to use this language moving forwards, because you always seem to be in a hurry, and what I suggest means adding extra words. Still, I think you would find it easier to connect with people you disagreed with if you called them human beings who are currently this or that. I think that might even benefit your own spiritual progression too, because you wouldn't get excessively caught up in labels and would remember that we're all souls here on a human journey. In fact, you could even go further and not just say she is a left-winger, but say something like she is Source made manifest, who is currently a left-winger. That is sort of the idea behind the term namaste, as well, where you honor the divine in the other person. Now, I understand that it might be too weird to actually say out loud something like, she is Source made manifest who is currently a left-winger, instead of just calling someone a left-winger. Still, it could benefit you spiritually to occasionally think of other people in this way. Or as practice, you could just take a walk and mentally label every person you come across as Source made manifest, who is currently a woman, or who is currently a police officer, etc. Us extraterrestrials are going to be giving you a mountain of understanding, and we won't take offense easily. Still, some of us won't actually like it if you say, for example, that Pleiadian is an engineer. No, he's not an engineer. He's a Pleiadian man, or if you prefer, he's Source made manifest, who happens to be doing engineering as his job. But he's not an engineer. He's a man, or he's Source made manifest, who just happens to have a certain job. Again, this person won't get angry at you, but he may still prefer to not be subtly dehumanized by you saying that he is an engineer. This also illustrates just how profoundly dehumanizing your society is, even down to the very language, which unfortunately makes sense when you realize that your culture has been strongly influenced by negative galactics who wanted to keep you down and control you. And don't even get me started on the inhumanity of the term human resources. Though obviously this isn't your fault, it's just the society you grew up in. And you are the ones suffering from being dehumanized. You have all of my love and compassion and empathy. Note that as you grow in consciousness and as your spiritual abilities increase, it becomes more and more important to be precise with your words. After all, words direct consciousness, and consciousness is boundlessly powerful. One example is what we looked at. That person isn't a cleaner. Instead, he is a human being who is currently a cleaner. Or, if you prefer, he is Source made manifest who is currently a cleaner. You can also use your own phrasing, of course. The point is just that you remind yourself that the other person deserves respect and to be treated with dignity, and that the other person might be able to change, and that labels don't define a person. If a powerful person said, "You are a cleaner," to someone with the intention of cursing them to never become or desire anything more than being a cleaner, then those words could actually work to curse a person in that way. Now, either none of you or almost none of you are currently spiritually powerful enough to do that. Besides, this would only work if you had the conscious intention to curse someone. Even a powerful person wouldn't curse someone to never be anything other than a cleaner if they just casually said, "You are a cleaner." Still, this does illustrate the importance of being careful with your language, especially as you grow spiritually. Do you now see how it's a form of control that your society nudges people to say, "I am a firefighter," or "I am a police officer," or "I am a programmer"? Your society is nudging people to dehumanize and possibly even curse themselves to never be anything but their job. And the control is so subtle that most people don't see it. This is part of how beings who are physically much less powerful than you are controlling you by using your own abilities against you. Therefore, be careful with your language, especially language in which you talk about yourself or about another person. Similarly, if a powerful enough person said, "You are a threat to democracy," and had the intention to use that as a curse, then that could actually serve as a way to curse someone to start behaving in ways that make them a threat to democracy. Now, the average person doesn't have strong magical abilities. Still, every single person on Earth has at least a tiny bit of unlocked magical ability. And millions of people directing their consciousness in the same direction can still produce an effect. Therefore, do you see that it's really not a good thing to dehumanize a person or a group of people in the minds of millions? In this way, you can actually nudge them to behave in a worse way. Now, yes, people have free will, but still you can energetically nudge people this way. Surely you've all felt an urge at times to go do something that didn't really rationally make sense. You weren't minded controlled in that moment, but you were nudged. This doesn't mean that dehumanizing Trump is bad. It also means that it's bad to dehumanize the left, or communists, or Jews, or men, or women, etc. Obviously, you can still disagree and debate and criticize and dislike certain people or groups. I would just advise you to not cross the line into outright hatred, or cross the line and start thinking of some group as irredeemably evil. You innately know where that line is. Trust your inner knowing. Frankly, if you fully unlocked the magical abilities of an average person who had an unfocused mind, whose intentions went every which way all the time, and who was careless with their words, then that would probably end in disaster. The average person should probably be grateful that he or she does not have much of their magical abilities unlocked. Earth languages also make magic much more dangerous to use for someone who isn't careful with their words or intentions. This is because your languages are so ambiguous. For instance, the words, "you are a cleaner," can mean, "you are currently a cleaner," but it can also mean, "you are and will never be anything but a cleaner." Now, it's actually magically powerful to consciously use a word that has two different meanings, because then you can say that word and have it work in both ways and on both levels. However, if a word has two meanings and you don't want to use both meanings of the word, then you had better be conscious when doing magic about which meaning of the word you actually are using. If you consciously decide which meaning of the word you are using, then your subconscious won't run into the other direction and give energy to the other meaning of the word, assuming that your mind is reasonably disciplined. Personally, if I use magic, then either I'm not using language, or I'm using a language where pretty much every word has exactly one meaning. Psychic languages are often like this because once words no longer need to be pronounceable by a human mouth, you can make a nearly infinite amount of words. Hence, it's easy to make a unique word for everything. If I wanted to do magic where I want one word to work on two levels, I would simply create a new word with those two meanings. Or I would use a pre-existing word with those two meanings that one of my brothers and sisters had created previously. And yes, there exist languages in the galaxy that are specifically made to be useful for doing magic. But I get that at the moment you're using Earth languages, so I'll give a few more examples of being careful with your words when speaking English. Whenever this channeler says, "I can't wait to meet you," then after expressing love and appreciation back to the channeler, we often also ask him, "Is it literally true that you cannot wait?" If that's not literally true, then it might be wiser to not use those words. Similarly, if you unconsciously refer to someone as Lord, that carries the energetic imprint that you're accepting them as your Lord, because that is one of the meanings of that word. Now, that is certainly something you can do. For example, accepting Jesus as your Lord can absolutely be valid and enrich your life. But if this channeler, for example, were to say, "Lord Ganesha," we would ask him, "Are you actually intending to accept Ganesha as your Lord? Or are you just being unconscious and careless with words?" In that case, it would be better to either say something like, "Beloved Ganesha," if he still wanted to be respectful towards Ganesha, or he could say, "Lord Ganesha," consciously, being aware that he's just using the word Lord as a generic honorific. Similarly, nowadays this channeler is using the word source and not the word God to refer to the ultimate creator. After all, one of the meanings of the word God is the being from the Old Testament, who in this channeler's view is pretty awful and is not the same as being source. Alternatively, this channeler could try to be conscious every time he uses the word God. However, it seems easier to him to just use the word source. Of course, that's just the choice this channeler is making. Other people are free to make their own choices. The channeler also doesn't say anymore that he's sovereign, because one of the meanings of that word is to be a king or queen. The channeler doesn't want to call himself a king. Now yes, there is also a positive meaning of the word sovereign, namely that someone is not automatically going to follow along just because someone else tells him to do something, but the channeler prefers to express that sentiment via words that don't carry the alternative meaning of being a queen or king. The good news here is that there's nothing stopping you from making your own words. You can just make a new word that has 3 positive meanings at once and then say, I am that word. Thereby you would bless yourself in 3 ways simultaneously, assuming your magical abilities are unlocked to a reasonable extent. If they aren't, I recommend just doing normal spiritual practice and inner work first. At some point your abilities may unlock automatically. Finally, let's return to more mundane matters. The person pretending to be Trump and the faction behind him are gray hats. Yes, they absolutely are doing certain things that are beneficial. However, it's not the case that the gray hats are your saviors and the rest of Earth humans aren't saviors. Similarly, it's also not the case that us galactics are your saviors and the rest of Earth humans aren't saviors. Ultimately, you are all liberators, and you are all contributing to Earth's liberation. For example, any person who does some inner work purifies the collective subconscious, and thereby provides a small but still real contribution to the liberation of the planet. That is a genuine contribution to your liberation. And yes, some gray hats and some Pleiadians are literally killing reptilians on your planet, and that is also definitely a contribution to your liberation. But that just makes this a group effort. Gray hats are contributing to your liberation. We are contributing to your liberation, and you too are contributing to Earth's liberation. You are all liberators. Furthermore, all paths lead to your liberation. No matter who gets shot, who gets elected, etc. No matter what, you will be free. Therefore, for most of you, it doesn't actually matter very much to have tons of knowledge, to know every detail, and to have a decent idea of what is going to happen when. Now yes, it has value to understand the world in broad strokes. However, beyond a certain point it might be more effective to look inwards rather than outwards. Spending time in nature or spending time with your loved ones is always a great idea. I hope that was informative. I also hope that you will be conscious with language, especially language that refers to yourself or others. And yes, better times are coming, and I love you so, so very much. Your star sister, Tunia.